when you're asking more specifically, how do you coach a leader to be a better coach? My first answer is get better at asking questions. You have to train yourself to not want to be so quick to jump in and solve problems for the other person.
Strategy is standard, but leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wolfpack Rise and Howl. I'm here today again with Kevin, and we're going to get into some organizational development stuff. Kevin, what are we going to talk about this week? I know last week we mentioned possibly talking about team coaching. Are you up for that, or you have something else on your mind today?
Well, good morning. Listen, I say that we have conversation, all things team coaching. I'm up for it. Let's do it.
All right. That sounds great. I will tell you a little bit about why it's been on my mind. Because I've been doing a lot more team coaching lately. I just got a certification in that. And I got to tell you, as much as I enjoy coaching individuals, I love that satisfaction of helping people, overcome obstacles and have some breakthroughs. And I've been doing quite a bit of business coaching. I got to tell you, team coaching is a whole completely different animal, and it's just as satisfying, but it's multiplied because you're dealing with a team. And because we spend so much time talking about, workplace things, I wanted to bring that up because in my experience, the transformation that happens on teams is quite remarkable, not only for the organization, but it's also quite good for individuals. And, we talked about onboarding so much the last couple of weeks, and we were focusing on what's good for the new hires, and just generally I'm concerned with what's good for employees, period, and that kind of employee experience of working at a place, And I think that one of the most significantly frustrating things is when you're in a workplace environment where you are working with a dysfunctional team. That can just ruin your whole experience. And, let's face it, a lot of workplace environments are made up of teams. I've rarely had an opportunity, when I used to work in corporate, I rarely had an opportunity where I wasn't working on a team. And if there was ever something that was going to make life miserable, it would often go back to some element of some dysfunction going on with the team. And teams are made up of people. So, we have to kind of deal with the interesting dynamics that happen amongst individuals and the impact that they have when you put a group of people together in a team and they have to get things done. And you've got to deal with a lot of different personalities, different agendas, different goals, aspirations, and it can be messy. So I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit because what I've seen happen has been unexpected, both for myself as the coach, and I would say even for the teams that I've coached, particularly the leaders of the teams that I've coached. So, for example, it can be eye-opening for leaders and management to get a better understanding of how people actually feel about working in the team, or how they feel about the leadership, or how they feel about the degree to which things are delegated or not delegated, the amount of control that's exercised. Feelings of being siloed are very common themes that have come out in some of the engagements that I've done. So I just wanted to kind of dig into that because I think it's important to talk about the value and the benefit of engaging with team coaching, making time for it. People might think that it's not worth the endeavor, or they'll have kind of a project management mindset like, why do we need a team coach? Because we've got project managers, and as long as they're getting their work done and they're getting the tasks completed, isn't that what matters? Those things do matter. However, the way you go about them and the legacy that you leave as a team and how you make people feel and how their experience is shaped while doing that work with that team also matters. That's my intro about it. Do you want to add anything to that before we dig into the details?
I'll say this. I had to knock the cobwebs off of, I haven't done any coaching in quite some time. And the form of coaching that I did as an HR practitioner was basically coaching leaders and not so much the individuals on their team. And what that encompassed was coaching them to be coaches to their team members. But
Mm-hmm.
typically, too, though, it was more focused on individuals versus a consolidation, if you will, of the team. And so it's a slightly different tact to take. So as I was pondering what we were going to discuss today, I started to probe a little bit more about what does it take a leader to become a good coach to a team versus the individuals on that team. And so I started to consider, what are those attributes? What does that skill set look like? What should that leader or that coach, if you will, to a team be mindful of in that capacity? But also the leaders themselves should also have a mindset, if you will, of being able to coach the team and not just the individuals on the team, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to provide the description for that because that's one of the things that I was going to go over anyway. So, the first thing I want to do is to make a distinction between team coaching and group coaching because you might hear those terms used interchangeably. They are definitively not the same. So, first, I'll start off by telling you what group coaching is. So, you'll have a group of people who can come together and they may have a shared interest, but each person has their own individual goals that they're trying to accomplish. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that your local community center in Pleasantville, USA, whatever, they're having some free uh, workshops for people who live in the town, and they're doing some group coaching. And let's say it's based on a topic. I'll just make up something. Maybe it's a group to help new parents adjust to to having a new baby in the house or new parenting, right? So, but these folks come in, they're not related to each other. They don't work in the same place. They don't know each other. They just come to this group that's being put on by the community center focused on this topic. But let's say one person in the group could be someone who is trying to adjust to new sleeping patterns. That's their goal. They want to get some sleep at night. Another person might have a goal of trying to figure out how to manage their time better so that they can balance work life balance with a newborn, a new baby in the house. That's their goal. Another person might be focused on trying to find ways to it could be a new mom who's focused on getting back in shape after pregnancy or whatever. These are all kind of under a higher overarching kind of focus, but each person has their own individual goal that they're working towards under that group topic. So a group coach could lead a discussion and really focus on their individual goal. So that coach would ask that person powerful questions to help them discover things about themselves and come up with some solutions, which is what coaching is all about. So that's group coaching. That's not what we're talking about today. Team coaching is different in that it is a group of people with a shared objective and a shared purpose. And you coach the team as one individual entity. We're not coaching every individual person and focusing on their individual goals that they have. We coach the team as a collective. So, for example, when you're asking questions, when you're initiating a team coaching engagement, for example, you ask the team, what do we want to focus on? And it's the team that has to decide together for itself collectively what it's going to do in service of its shared purpose and objective. Now, what this does is this teases out how teams make decisions. How do they demonstrate diversity of opinions and thoughts? How do they deal with that? Do they make sure that there's diversity of thought? Do they include everybody? How well are they communicating with each other? What is the level of interdependency amongst the team members and how that team functions as one unit? So you see how that's quite different than group coaching. One shared purpose, one shared objective. Now, I'll go even further and tell you what team coaching is not. It is not project management. It is not facilitation. It is not mentoring, and it is not training. So it's dealing specifically with trying to enable the team to become more interdependent, improve their communications, improve their decision-making skills, and to help them to become aware of how connected they are and how they come and arrive at decisions together collectively. It may seem at first, oh well, we make these decisions, and we're getting along just fine. We're getting our tasks done. We're checking off the boxes. We're getting the work done. But I will tell you that I have had one engagement comes to mind where the team was highly functional, highly effective, and absolutely getting things done. However, what surfaced from doing the team coaching engagement is that there's always room for improvement. They could do things even better than what they're already doing. Part of the team coaching experience involves having individual one-on-one interviews with each team individually so that you can find out how they're feeling about their place in the team and how the team functions. And there's some very well-crafted questions to ask during that interview, whereby you can learn things about how the team functions. And I will tell you some recurring themes that have come up is oftentimes people feel siloed. Sometimes people feel like they don't have a voice on the team. Oftentimes people will feel a little bit left out because of that. Also, there are usually people who are naturally strong leaders on a team, and they're usually very motivated, very well-intended people, but through their actions of over-functioning sometimes and overdoing and always doing, other people might just lay back in the cut and just let that happen. And the team will get things done and check off their tasks and be effective at accomplishing project goals and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that everybody's feeling good about it just because they're silent about it. Do you know what I'm saying? And so inadvertently be leaving a lot of people's opinions out, and you could therefore be missing an opportunity for innovation and being more creative and finding new and different ways of doing things, all because the team dynamic is a little bit off. It's not ideal. It's not the best that it could be. Not everybody is feeling comfortable with speaking up. Some people feel that they don't want to call out things that need to be said. They don't want to call attention to themselves, and they don't want, and then there may be fear of retaliation or something like that. So The heartbeat of a highly functioning team is trust, of course. And so you have to deliberately go through certain things that you do to foster a level of trust on a team. That's just kind of like the high level overview about how team coaching works and why it's beneficial to do it, because it's the things that you don't know, the things you
Mhm.
don't know that you don't know that
Right,
are
right.
revealed during team coaching. And I
Yeah.
have seen some leaders have just very obvious aha moments when they read the reports that I give them. So that's basically team coaching in a nutshell, just to get started
Yeah.
with. So, what kind of thoughts do you have on, or questions do you have?
Well, thanks for first and foremost breaking down or providing a distinction between group coaching and team coaching, because there, as you pointed out, is a very significant difference. The objective, the intent, they're just different. Okay, they're not one and the same, if you will. One of the points that I think you really hammered on for me is that you described what I think is a key attribute for effective team coaching, and that's the ability to look at the team as a whole. What's the goal? What's the objective for the team as a whole, but not to any particular individual on the team? And I think that's one of the key things that somebody, even someone that's accustomed to coaching individuals, once they've segued into coaching a team, collectively, they've got to really kind of shift their mindset to some degree, I feel, in order to become an effective coach for an entire team.
My experience delving into this, it's just been really an interesting experience so far, and I'm really glad that I went in this direction. It just seemed like a natural progression for me, coming from a learning and development background with coaching and also with change management. Even more specifically, coaching is very much a key element to change management. More particularly, if you take that a step further and are more deliberate about choosing team coaching during a change initiative, it's really, really powerful. Having these realizations and strengthening the trust on a team, especially when an organization is going through a change, is so fundamental to success. And so, I just kind of wanted to speak to that. And the other thing, too, is that it's not just beneficial for the organization. There are a lot of things that the individuals can benefit from through team coaching. They learn more about themselves, how they communicate, how that can translate into their personal life. And, it's quite remarkable. So during a team coaching engagement, especially when you have the one on one interviews with each of the individual team members, there's an opportunity for them to express themselves. And during those sessions, I also ask them, well, what do you want to gain out of this team coaching engagement for yourself? And it's interesting because I've had a couple people say to me, oh, nobody's ever asked me, what do I want to get out of that? And that was something that made them feel pretty good. It made them feel involved, appreciated, valued, and more engaged. So these are just some of the things that I'm talking about in terms of what works great for the individual. And how can that show up in their personal life? I mean, who wouldn't want to learn more about themselves and the way that they interact with others, and how can they use that in their personal life? Who wouldn't want to improve their communication skills? Who wouldn't want to improve their ability to foster trust amongst the people that they engage with, not only professionally, but personally? Who wouldn't want to benefit from that?
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that I'm so glad that you brought into the picture, the synergy between team coaching and performance and development, because it is very important. The two need to be joined at the hip. I think one of the things that a team coach should focus on is facilitating learning for the team as a whole, finding ways that the individual team members can gain some insight, practice some different behaviors, so that the team becomes more effective as a team.
I wanted to also add that when you're asking more specifically, how do you coach a leader to be a better coach? My first answer is get better at asking questions. You have to train yourself to not want to be so quick to jump in and solve problems for the other person. You want to
Mm-hmm.
allow them a moment, give them the time and the space to think and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why that's so powerful is because if you can ask them questions and help them raise awareness about themselves and help them work to identify their strengths and lean into those strengths and leverage them, we all have a job to do on a team. We've got to get from point A to point B. We have work to do, we have goals to accomplish. But if you can get folks to be more accountable and inspire them to own it more from their own perspective by asking them questions and
Mm-hmm.
challenging them to find the solutions and think deeper about it rather than to just tell them and always being so directive. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
When they have that ownership because they've participated in arriving at the conclusions, they're going to hold on to that a lot quicker and it's going to be more meaningful to them
Mm-hmm.
than if you just tell them what to do.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Yeah.
more powerful to like, okay, let's walk through this. What would you do
Yeah.
and
No,
why?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. You know what it makes me think about what you just said is that perhaps the team coach should practice being more collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
and and to the point where you mentioned, asking more questions, getting more insight from the team members, collectively. Well, what are y'all's thoughts? You know, um, and not to also expect there to be immediate answers to everything. I think it's important to allow the team to, you know, to arrive at certain places, if you will. Even as the leader, you have certain thoughts, and you pretty much know where things should end or whatever. You should allow the team members to arrive there, and I think that requires some bit of savvy, if you will, on the leader's part or the coach's part to allow that to happen. Um,
It's much more meaningful to the individual and it's a lot
yeah.
more powerful. And I want to caution there, it's so tempting to be directive and instruct and facilitate all the time. It's so
Mhm.
tempting, especially if you're like kind of a controlling kind of person. And I'm not trying to, insinuate any kind of negative connotations with that. But I mean, some people are more controlling than others. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons why that is. And there are situations where we don't have time for this. And, if it's like a critical emergency type situation, we literally just don't have time for that level of collaboration.
Mhm.
Yes, then you do have to be directive and you do have to delegate with authority or mandate or direct whatever. Those should be occurring less, but you need to be able as a leader to know the difference between when to use that leadership style and not to use that leadership style. For the most part, co-creating coaching goals, co-creating outputs and outcomes, and discussing what the end goal is going to be. You've got the current state and the end state. After
Mhm.
speaking particularly around change, okay, it's more often than not, you're going to have time. You just have to make it time. You may not think you have time, but trust me, you have the time. You will make it. I have
Mhm.
literally seen at least one team that I remember when I first started with them, they were so time constrained and they were so concerned about that. I mean, I kept hearing the word capacity repeated over and over again for our first few sessions. Oh, we don't have enough time. But once they went through the process, and I was so happy that they just trusted the process. By the time their coaching engagement came to an end, guess what they did? They're like, okay, going forward, we're definitely going to make time in every meeting that we have. We're going to make time for some coaching in the beginning. We're going to make time for this. So they adopted a new way of doing things because they got to realize how powerful it is when you do lean into the coaching and you learn more about yourselves as individuals and as a team. Then
Yeah.
it's funny because the outcomes just start popping out by themselves. It's like magic. When a team is a highly functioning team and they're firing on all pistons and they're popping, right? You
Mhm.
don't have to be as directive. They're taking ownership. They're engaged. They are innovating. They're communicating better. They have usually able to improve their decision making process. And if you also take the time to utilize something, for example, like Clifton Strengths, right? I usually try to do some kind of an assessment for each person so that the team has an understanding of how each person works, what their preferences are, what makes them tick. And once you have that understanding about each other and you get to know each other better, then you can start coming up with ways where, oh, well, if you prefer this way, if your strength is you're more structured and whereas this person over here likes to be a little bit more, go with the moment, they might realize that they may be better off to allocate tasks differently
Mhm.
because they may find that this person over here who's very meticulous, very detail oriented, they're going to thrive if you give them this type of work to do. This person over here is going to do a little bit better if you give them this type of work to do. If you don't go through those processes and get to learn these things about people and get to have a better understanding of them and how they function and how they work, you would never know that.
No, you
And when
wouldn't.
if you are willing to then use the information that you gained and put it to good use and be willing and trust that now, okay, well, I need to, maybe Jane over here is better suited for the more detail oriented tasks, whereas it really grates on Bob's nerves or whatever, but he has signed that task because, I don't know, he just was, but he doesn't love it, but she would. Maybe she would do better at it. Maybe he'd do better at doing something else. When the team comes together and they start really being willing to change things around so that they function more efficiently, that's where you're going to save your
Yeah.
time. You see,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just one of the benefits.
Yeah.
So,
I like how you use the assessments because that would help the leader or the coach, if you will, to be able to plug and play based on the individual team members' strengths and so forth or whatever. One of the things that you mentioned earlier on about the leader or the coach not being so directive, I think that's very important. And that sort of came back up with all that you just shared as well, which leads me to make the following comment. I think to be an effective team coach, uh, the coach has to be comfortable to allow some level, if you will, of ambiguity. And what I mean by that is that it takes time for that team to really come together, resonate, and start clicking. Um, you know, and you know this better than me because you're so much deeper into coaching or whatever. But team dynamics often create some level of unpredictability, especially at the very beginning. You don't know how it's going to, how it's going to shake out at the beginning stages of coaching that team. So based on that, I think that coaches shouldn't expect, as you mentioned earlier on, to drive, to be so directive, if you will, and look for specific outcomes of the team. I think they should allow for that to sort of, you know, come about on its own, if you will, without being too directive, if you will, towards that outcome. Um, I think they should be open to, you know, allowing the team or be willing to allow the team to learn ways in which the team works. Okay, and that comes through discovery, if you will, by the team itself, and not necessarily being coached or directed into a particular space, if you will.
But you know what, Kevin? That's the thing. It takes strength to embrace that. Because I think that some people don't even realize when they're being overly directive or they're over functioning. And I have seen it happen. It's just become often such a natural habit, and it's a hard habit to break. It really is. And especially if you're someone who feels stressed and feels like you don't have a lot of time and you feel like you're not convinced yet that you can let go of the reins. I think that one of the most difficult things that and I see this in small business owners a lot, the difficulty in delegating.
Mm.
It's like, oh, nobody's going to do it the way that I do it. And there's like, they don't mean to be that way usually, but they just are because they're fearful that it's not going to get done just the right way that they want to do it. But what they don't understand is that you're cutting yourself short. You can't scale like that. If you can't delegate, you're going to burn yourself out trying to do everything, over
Sure.
functioning. And in doing so, you kind of send a message subliminally that you don't trust your people.
Mhm.
You don't trust them.
Yeah.
You don't have faith
Yeah.
in them. You don't believe in them. You think they're somewhat maybe not as competent as you would like for them to be. And you know what? That degrades people's engagement over time. I mean, seriously, if you are someone who's working somewhere and someone is just over functioning all the time and they never give you a chance to take a stab at it and there's no room for making mistakes and everything has to be perfect. And so this leader who thinks they're being helpful, oh, hey, let me just help you out with that. Oh, well, did you do? And they're like looking over your shoulder. That's annoying.
Mhm.
That tells that person, I like you. I hired you. Yeah, you've got this job, but you know, mm, I just don't think that. Yeah, I just can't let you do this. You know what? People get tired of that, and they'll leave. People want to feel useful. They want to have a chance to explore. They need the space to make mistakes if you can. Not all
Yeah.
environments are suited for that. In critical safety environments, there has to
Mhm.
be,
Sure.
we under, all that goes without saying, but that's where proper training and mentoring and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
guidance comes in so that you can scaffold that person to the point that they can be trusted to take over critical dependency type roles, right?
I think there has to be some level of tolerance for some risk, because
Right.
I don't see how the team can grow and learn if it's not allowed, if you will, to take some level of risk. As I was preparing for our conversation today, one thing that I came across was that, um, you know, there were three things that were suggested in this one article I was reading about, you know, fostering growth and development within a team, and the three things were, or one of the three things was breaking the rules. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
really? Breaking the rules? What do you mean by that? And the article basically was just saying that, doing something different, within a team to, in a positive, but not in a, in a negative way, where it would have a negative impact or whatever, but in a positive way, create some positive turbulence, if you will,
Yeah.
that would
Well,
basically give way to some new possibilities, if you will. But that would not come about unless the team was allowed to take some level, if you will, degree of risk.
you're absolutely right. And what you're describing is aligned with the Tuckman model. The stages of group development. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with Tuckman?
I've heard you
Forming,
reference it.
yeah,
I've heard
forming,
you reference it.
yeah,
Yeah.
forming, storming,
Mhm.
norming, and then
Mhm.
performing.
Okay. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, during that forming stage, everybody, let's just say it's a new team. They're just coming to get together. They're just kind of getting to know things. Things are clunky. They're clunky. And you know what? They get uncomfortable. Yeah. So, you go through this period of conflict and challenges, while each team member starts to express their differences, and you're just getting to know each other, and you're establishing roles, and, you know, then during the storming phase, that's where these power struggles come out, the agendas, and yeah, and that's where you get these strong characters that show up. Then they want to take over, you know, and if
Wait a minute,
you
you haven't said anything for the last 2 weeks. Now all of a sudden you come out of the woodwork.
yeah, or that silent person that's passive aggressive, they don't really
Mm,
contribute, but they sure got something. They got a smirk, or they got a or a grump, or a sound, or a you know you go through
yeah.
all these things, but you know what that is? That's people, they don't trust each other yet.
Mm,
And they,
yeah.
and as much as the leaders need to be willing to delegate and be willing to not be so directive and allow the team to kind of meld together, each person has to be willing to be vulnerable to a degree. And the
Mm,
risk is not only coming just from the leader's side, that they have to be willing to allow for a certain amount of risk. The individuals need to be vulnerable, and they need to also be, you know, um,
yeah.
willing to take some risks, speak up, speak out, because they need to be willing to have healthy conflict so that they can get all out on the table. Because it's only when you start identifying all of these really uncomfortable things, it is only then that you can establish what your norms are going to be as a team. Okay, well,
Hmm.
what is going to be our solution to resolve conflict? How are we going to have a process around that? What do we want to be known as a team? What will our team look like when it's at its best? And you set your ground rules, and you set your value statements as a team.
Hmm.
So you
Yeah.
just lay it all out on the line. And
Hmm.
how will you address power struggles? Who's going to have the
Hmm.
final say? There's a formula for developing a decision making process. And when things get weird and they get really super uncomfortable, like something really gnarly comes up, if you've done the work in advance, even up to and including creating a team charter, it's
Hmm.
kind of like, hey, this is how we're going to handle things.
Yeah.
And if you
With
have a, if you have, and if you anticipate some of the ugliest stuff that's going to come up, if you've planned ahead for it, and you say, okay, if we find ourselves completely at a crossroads, we're having a power struggle, we're going to refer to our charter. What did we as a
mm,
team decide that we're going to do to address these certain things? How are we going to structure our framework around how we move? You see how
yeah.
those things have nothing to do with your work
Right.
yet.
Right.
We
I was
haven't
going to
even
mention
talked
that.
about.
Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier, and I think what you just hit it on the nail head. What I wanted to share earlier, because as I shared with you when I was kind of preparing for our conversation today, one of those recommendations was to break the rules or whatever, and I kind of was taken back a little bit. Well, because I was thinking about boundaries that are also set because those are important, and I think you just spoke to that. Identifying what those boundaries are up front, the things that are non-negotiable, things that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we got to do this way because that's the company's charter, if you will. Um, but whatever those boundaries are, identify them up front, and then everything else is fair game. In terms of perhaps maybe some risk taking amongst the team.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I would have to say, because I mean, I've had some pretty uncomfortable situations with teams, and you've got all the characters. You got the naysayers, you got the power hungry, you got the passive aggressives. You got you got the people who slack off and don't carry their weight. They don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't contribute. You got all these different characters at play in teams, right? And if there's one thing I gotta say for anybody, you have got to be willing to embrace conflict because it's coming.
Hmm.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Yeah.
always be sugar coated little cream puffs and la di da,
World's not perfect.
Yeah. And no, nobody's perfect. And, I'm just gonna be really frank. Um, I personally find that working in a team can be quite a pain in the butt sometimes, but it just is a part of life. So, do you want to face it head on and find a way to navigate it effectively to make it better? Or do you want to just be grumpy and be like, working team sucks, blah, 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 I don't want to do it? Like, that's not going to accomplish anything at all. And I wanted to call out too, when I'm talking about a charter for the team, I'm not even talking about anything yet that has to do with the company. I'm talking about just that team's
Mhm.
personal
Yeah.
internal charter for this particular group of people, this team.
Yeah.
You identify what is the team's purpose? Why does it even exist?
Yeah.
What? Why? What are we doing? What are your objectives? What is your shared? What is that shared collective reason for being? What is that? Um, but notice that I've mentioned all of these things, all of this work that needs to be done to effectively form a team, get it together, coach a team, for that team to establish its foundations for trust and its ability to engage conflict and to work through it, its ability to navigate change, and for its ability to effectively execute on its purpose. Haven't mentioned a darn thing about a concrete project management task. We haven't talked about. So do you see how this work is different?
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
haven't I haven't mentioned anything about a work breakdown structure. There's no Gantt chart. Like,
Hmm.
that's for project managers. Okay? And
Yeah.
team coaches and project managers and change practitioners, and leaders can all collaborate and work together with the same team for different reasons and purposes and to achieve different outcomes. But for the
Hmm.
team to work on itself, this teamwork is completely different work.
Hmm. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
means taking time to have these conversations. It means taking time to establish the boundaries and the foundation and the team's charter. It means being willing to have difficult conversations. It means suspending judgment. It means not retaliating. And it means for that team's leader, whether that's their manager or department director or whatever, for them to let that team form, storm, norm so that they can perform. And
Mm.
like you said, allowing a certain amount of risk, allowing the messiness to come out. Because when you try to hold it all together, we want everything to be good and we don't want to deal with the messy bits. Guess what? That stuff is there. It's just going to be
Right.
bubbling against the surface. And when it comes out, it's ugly.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
nice. And when it comes out, and by the time it comes out under those circumstances, people are pissed off. People may quit, leave, projects become in jeopardy. You get resistance, you get just mutiny. I mean, it's not good.
Hmm.
So it's absolutely worth it to handle your teams with care and make time for this because
Yeah.
resentment is a bitter pill that can poison a whole entire team. And I would much rather deal with conflict respectfully and through a structured process that was agreed upon, and we can behave as adults and work through the conflict, focusing on the conflict itself. What are some of the solutions to achieve the outcomes that we desire without picking apart the individuals and without things getting all super personal and ugly and hurtful?
Yeah. Yeah.
That takes an incredible amount of discipline and a commitment to really growing your team trust and building your interdependency amongst the team
Mhm.
members. It's a different kind of work.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is. By the way, that will give rise one day, I'm sure, in a future podcast to discuss conflict and how we resolve those conflicts. But anyway, no, this is great stuff.
Well, that's barking up
Wanda.
your tree now, isn't it? Aren't you like the
It
certified
is. It it
conflict?
it it is. I've done a few of those over the years. Um, but yeah, no. I think you mentioned one thing, and it reminded me of an author. I'm sure you're very familiar with John C. Maxwell, who one of the earlier experts, if you will, on teamwork, how to manage teams and so forth and so on, coaching, etc., whatever. One of the things that he mentions in this one publication, leadership 101, no, not leadership. Is it leadership 101? Teamwork 101, that was the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
He mentions at the very beginning of the book about, teams are not perfect, okay? And we all need each other, okay? There's not one person. I think if you gave me a list of however many very accomplished um, individuals in terms of what they did in life, and like we'll take for an example Michael Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
who's arguably, or some people will argue whether he's the greatest. Most people think and feel that he is the greatest basketball player to come along or whatever. But Michael mentioned in a book some years ago, even with all of his personal great accolades as an NBA star, if you will, he didn't do it by himself. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way that he could do it. Yeah, he's got some very, very impressive stats that still hold up today, and he's been retired for a number of years now. Um, but it was a result of being part of a team and learning how to work with that team and being single minded, being focused, having one goal, objective as a team, not as the one of the five individual starters on that team or whatever, but collectively those five people or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so important. And it just gets back to, though, that there is, um, you know, no team is going to be perfect or whatever, and you have to work through those things. But the differences based on the individual personalities, so forth and so on. But yeah, this is a fascinating topic. I love it. I don't know what else I can say about what we've talked about. We probably could offshoot into some other very specific areas or whatever, but I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we covered this today. I think it's really super important, and you know, quite a bit of the work that I enjoy um, is when I can pull all of these things together. You know, especially when it comes to organizational change management. There's a role for all of the things that I love to do. Um, coaching, like I said, is a really key piece to that because change management, of course, deals with, especially if you're talking about like a software change. The change management begins the moment that somebody recognizes that a change needs to be made. So it starts there, right?
Simple as
And
that.
right, it's yeah, and because then you have to, and it could come up different ways because there could be like a problem, like something's not working right. Okay, well, we need to get to the root of the problem, so we'll do a needs analysis, or we will do a process analysis. What is going on with the way that we do things? What's the evidence that something's not right? So then you go through this whole strategic needs analysis, and it should be comprehensive, and you include people across, the organization, etc. Because you definitely want to be systemic. We talked about being systemic last week. That just goes for everything, okay? And
Sure.
then you'll have some findings. I'm like, yeah, well, this is the problem, and here's the evidence that says that this is a problem. Okay, well, then you apply, there's a theory. Is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? So, one of my favorite people that I studied, Thomas Gilbert. He has he. This book is so old, but it's still so relevant. He taught his leisurely theorems. Basically, is it worth solving a performance issue? Because if it's going to take too much effort to fix it, then the return on the investment's not going to yield. Then don't you have to figure out you have to fix things that are worth being fixed, basically.
Or give rise to a larger issue.
Right. So
Yeah.
therefore, let's assume that we've figured out that it's worth fixing. All right. So then the moment that you arrive at that point, now we're getting into change management, because you have to establish what the business case is. So you have to present the evidence of what's the problem that we need to change. What are we changing? Or it could be something that's not necessarily performance based, but it's like, hey, our company just got sold or merged. There's a big change. There are going to be a lot of processes, a lot of technical things that are going to happen. So there's the natural project management related type things that always are going to be a part of a change initiative. And in the beginning, establishing the business need, documenting that, identifying the key players, the change champions, the sponsors, identifying the stakeholders, who all is going to be impacted by this change and how, right? So that's all the front end stuff. Are we ready as an organization to go through this change? So you do the organizational readiness strategy assessment. There's lots of questions that need to be answered around that. There's all this technical stuff, but you really want to know the heart of change management? It's the people side.
Oh.
Because people drive the change.
Wow.
People have to be willing, they have to be desirous of adopting to the change. And so you can chart out all kinds of project management strategies and this, that, and the other, and key milestones and Gantt charts and and all the little stuff. But you know what? If people are either going to be willingly going along and participating with this change, or they may not. And that is the piece that's super important, because you're dealing with people. These changes are not going to fix themselves. They're not going to execute themselves. You have to deal with the people. That's the people side of change. I'm quoting ProSci for that, ProSci change management. So, I'll just walk through, the ADKAR model. That's a ProSci, awareness, desire, knowledge. This is where the learning and development piece comes in, adoption and reinforcement. Awareness. Okay. So you have your communication strategies, you have to tell people that the change is coming. You got to prepare them for that. And then the desire, how are you going to get them to want to participate and be a part of the initiative in a positive way that's going to help you? You can either get through this smoothly or it can suck. The choice is yours. And if you just forget about the people that have to execute on all of the tasks that are going to bring about the change, you're really not starting off on a good foot. And this is why I like I said earlier, it's a natural progression for me to, coming from a really strong learning and development background and performance consulting, naturally progressing into coaching just seemed like the logical thing to do. Because even if you're talking about learning and development, just straight up training, we're not even talking about change management. If you're just talking about, hey, we need a training program developed, we need a training initiative, we've got a new software, everybody needs training on it. That's pretty straightforward. That's very easy to understand. We have to create training so that people can learn how to use this new software. Okay, whatever. Or if the training is about something else, maybe not so technical, we have to learn a new way of doing things. That screams for a change management component to be added to it, because you're asking people to do things a different way, right? So even before I got into change management, even as an instructional designer, I always knew instinctively people need post-training support. Coaching is the best that's like one of the best ways to reinforce that training that you just
Sure.
invested a lot of money into. Because once they're back on the job and they have to implement these new skills that they just learned, who's going to follow up to measure it?
Mhm.
Who's going to do a gut check? And who's going to make sure they don't just try to go back to doing things the old way?
Yeah.
I
Who's
have
going to
seen that
reinforce it?
happen. Yeah.
Right. Hmm.
So this all comes back around. All this stuff is intermingled. This comes back around. Learning and development requires a change management component, which begets coaching already baked into the its essential processes. Okay, so these things all meet in the same intersection, and they're all very connected. They're very
Hmm.
necessary, and when you implement them all together, the results are going to be exponentially better. Research has
Hmm.
already proved that. You don't have to take my word for it. I mean,
Hmm.
I not only know from my education background and the training that I've gotten and being certified in change management, but I've seen it with my own eyes. Not only
Sure.
from the practitioner side, but
Hmm.
from just me as an individual. Remember, we talked last week about how I had that weird experience when, or maybe it was a week before last, when I talked about how I wasn't set up for success in an old
Yeah.
job
The
way, way long
new
ago.
jobs.
I think
Yeah.
that might have been the
Hmm.
first week, the first
Yeah.
episode.
I think I recall too. Certainly won't name the organization.
Right.
Rather large organization, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know what? That sucks. And people don't like the way that makes them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Ultimately, you will lose good talent like that. Because if you don't invest in dealing with the people side of things that are going on in your organization,
Happens all the time.
and you may not see it coming until they're gone. They might be the
Yep.
most quietest, most polite people, but they might also be sitting there feeling so disengaged and devalued and unimportant. So, how does this all tie back into coaching, whether it's individual or even team coaching? It's all about people,
It is. Yeah.
period. It's all about people. And as long as you can stay focused on that and you be earnest about that and care about that in a genuine way, you're going to be better off than not. So
Yeah.
that's kind of it for today. I think we've had a nice little conversation about that. I am
I think
interested to
we
know.
put a nice down payment on that conversation, and so much more conversation can come out of what we just even introduced in our
Well,
conversation.
you brought up conflict, so maybe we can get let's dig into that next week.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Let's do it. Conflict. Exactly what I want to talk about. No, for
Yeah.
sure, though. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
let's put on there.
I
Yeah,
talked about my area of expertise this week, so I want you to talk about your area
I would
of
love to. I
expertise
would love
next
to.
week.
Yeah, let's do
Yeah,
it.
so get ready for it. I'm really interested to learn, from you uh more about that
Okay.
from a
I'll
strategy
be
and a
more.
framework perspective. I love
Yeah.
a good framework, I love a good
Okay.
strategy.
All right. Well, I'll be. I will be prepared to have that conversation on next week's podcast. Looking forward
Sounds
to it.
great. Well, that brings an end to episode 3 of
Wow.
the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to join the conversation, you can reach us at www.whitewolfinc.com. I'll have the details down in the description section. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and like this video if you found value in that, and share it with your colleagues and friends. We would be most appreciative of that. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Take care. Bye bye.